And now, a passage from Southern California in Civil War Days by Percival J. Cooney. California was fortunately spared the horrors of actual fighting during the Civil War period, but nevertheless, soldiers were very much in evidence and nowhere was partisan feeling more bitter. And there is much reason for believing that there was a widespread conspiracy to deliver Southern California to the Confederacy, a conspiracy that was frustrated by the prompt action of the military authorities. No comprehension of the time or the events can be had without first taking a bird's eye view of the land and the people as they existed in 61 to 65. Los Angeles was a town of less than 2,000 persons, San Gabriel a village of a few hundred. Between San Gabriel and San Bernardino, there was but one settlement of note, El Monte, where on the sub-irrigated lands of the San Gabriel Valley, the American pioneers who had come out on a wagon train in 1852 were clearing the swampy land and establishing homes. There was a native California village at the site of the old mission at the turn of the river a mile or two north of Montebello, and a tiny hamlet at Cucamonga. The great cities of today, Pasadena, Glendale, and the beach towns, did not exist. The whole territory from the west end of the San Fernando Valley to San Bernardino was devoted to but two industries, cattle and grain raising. But it was primarily a cattle country. There was no fencing law. That is, a man engaged in farming was obliged to fence his land to protect it from the encroachments of the half-wild range cattle. Through this sparsely settled land ran the San Bernardino Road, which later has become the Valley Boulevard. San Bernardino was a town of about 1,000 people, composed of Mormons and Southerners. The entire population south of Tehachapi was not more than 12,000. 3/4 of these were Southerners by birth and ancestry. Until October 1861, news arrived by Pony Express from the east to San Francisco and was wired to Los Angeles. Stages ran 2 or 3 times a week, and later daily, eastward by Warner's Ranch, the Imperial Desert, and to Yuma. The events of the early months of 1861 brought home to the people of California that matters in the East were approaching a crisis. Lincoln was inaugurated March 4th, and Jefferson Davis was inaugurated as president of the Confederacy 4 days later. The eyes of the state were fixed on the California legislature, and a sigh of relief went up from all Union men when on April 4th, 1861, it elected McDougal, a Union man, as United States Senator. On April 26th came the news of the firing on Fort Sumter, and in May, after a prolonged and fierce debate, the California legislature passed loyal resolutions placing the state squarely behind the Lincoln government. The rage of the Southern sympathizers at these last two events was so violent, their denunciations so bold and defiant, that even the military authorities were amazed and anxious. Brigadier General Sumner, writing on April 28, 1861, to the Adjutant General at Washington, said, "I have no doubt that there is some deep scheming to draw California into the secessionist movement. The troops now here will hold their position on all government property, but, and this admission is significant coming from the general of the military district, if there should be a general uprising of the people, it would be impossible to put it down." Santa Barbara reports that the native population of California will join the secessionist movement to a man. Captain Hancock in Los Angeles states that persons who have been influential in politics are active in encouraging acts of hostilities. The bear flag, then considered an assertion of states' rights, was paraded through the streets of El Monte, and a company known to be secessionists was said to be drilling. Editor Sherman of a San Bernardino paper reports that secret meetings in San Bernardino and El Monte are being held by secessionists. The stars and stripes are openly cursed, and he begs that a company of cavalry be sent to San Bernardino. In 1862, we find in a report from Major Carleton, who was in command of the troops later stationed at San Bernardino, the first reference to an unusual congregation of miners in the mountains, particularly in Bear and Holcomb valleys. He estimated their numbers at from 1,000 to 1,800 men. Attempts to form a union club failed, and the streets in the evening rang with cheers for Jeff Davis. San Bernardino and El Monte were regarded by the authorities as the two dangerous spots. Troops were kept at San Bernardino until the end of the war and were stationed at El Monte intermittently. Henry Willis of San Bernardino reports on August 5, 1861, that a man named Kelsey, a man enterprising, cautious, and brave, has held meetings in Holcomb Valley. A friend of Willis, by arrangement, attended as a spy and reported to him that the purpose of the meetings were to ascertain the fighting force of the seceders in the county and enroll them as a force to act in connection with other forces throughout the state, having for its object the seizure of public property here, and to raise the standard of rebellion and bring on a civil war in the state. August 6th, 1861, Charles Bennett reports from San Bernardino, they are enlisting all they can. The headquarters is in Holcomb Valley. They expect to go via Texas to the Jeff Davis Confederation. They are to go in squads and to travel in the night. It will be noted how close a resemblance this plan, which will be treated of again, bears to that of Judge Hastings, with whom we shall deal later. The two Los Angeles papers at the time were the Star and the Southern News. The Southern News, oddly enough, supported the government in a rather mild manner, while the Star openly stated that Lincoln was responsible for this unholy, unjust, unconstitutional, and unjustifiable war. It criticized Lincoln's immortal first inauguration speech as not meaning anything in particular. The principal hotel at the time in Los Angeles was the Bella Union, now the St. Charles Block on Main Street. It was a gathering place for the Southern chivalry, and guests wearing the uniform of the United States were treated with such scant courtesy that the military authorities finally ordered the soldiers to cease patronizing it. On one occasion, a large picture of General Beauregard was displayed and hung in the hotel with much acclaim. These events doubtless led to the organization of the Home Guards in Los Angeles, the moving spirits in which were Don Abel Stearns and Henry Barrows, United States Marshal. Visalia in the San Joaquin Valley was another town where secession spirit ran rampant. It is an everyday occurrence, writes the officer in charge of Visalia in 1862, for them to cheer in the streets for Jefferson Davis and follow it with groans for the Stars and Stripes. They insult the soldiers by calling them Lincoln's hirelings. Dr. Russell, one of their leaders, paid his license and posted it in his window with this notation, "I pay this license to help murder my people back east." He further reports that fistfights between soldiers and citizens are of daily occurrence, and in the previous week a soldier had been shot and killed. The election, which took place in September 1861, saw a near riot on the streets of San Bernardino. Captain Davidson, in command of the soldiers there, says, "I drove to the polls in a buggy about the time of their closing and found a mob of 200 or 300 people standing around, most of them with sticks in their hands. They began shouting, 'Hurrah for Jeff Davis! Hurrah for the Southern Confederacy!' in spite of the fact that my men were only 300 yards away. Most of them had revolvers as well. One of them shouted at me that if the Union men felt they were stronger, that they could start in, that they could beat them robbing and burning any day. The captain stood up in his buggy and denounced them as enemies of the country. Then, whipping up his horses, he drove straight into the crowd, and he adds rather naively that he believes that he rode over one man. He returned in a few moments with a squad of dragoons on horseback and spoke to the crowd from the saddle, warning them that treasonable sentiment would not be tolerated. This brought a cheer from a small group of Union men who had gathered about, and the crowd sullenly dispersed. September 30th, 1861, General E.V. Sumner, in command of the Pacific Department with headquarters at San Francisco, gave the following orders to Colonel Wright at Camp Drum, as the military post at Wilmington was called. The secession party in the state numbers about 32,000, and they are very restless and zealous, which gives them great influence. They are congregating in the southern part of the state, and it is there they expect to continue their operations against the government, put a stop to all demonstrations in favor of the rebel government or against our own. You will establish a strong camp at Warner's Ranch and take measures to make Fort Yuma perfectly secure. The Knights of the Golden Circle. Behind all these apparently sporadic outbursts was undoubtedly the consciousness that the disturbers had back of them a widespread organization, the Knights of the Golden Circle. At a comparatively early date, however, the government was well informed about this organization, partly through detectives employed for that purpose and partly through Union men who, pretending to be Southerners, succeeded in entering their lodges. Clarence E. Bennett of San Bernardino, by means of a friend who posed as a secessionist in August 1861, secured a copy of their pledge and constitution and forwarded it to General Sumner of San Francisco. It reads as follows. Whereas a crisis has arrived in our political affairs which demands the closest scrutiny and strictest vigilance of every true patriot as an American citizen, and whereas we view with regret and heartfelt sorrow the existence of a civil war now waged by one portion of the American people against one another, and whereas we also believe that this war has been called into requisition by the present executive of the United States without the guarantee of the Constitution, and without the consent of either branch of the American Congress in their legislative capacity, and believing this is an unjust, unholy, iniquitous war, therefore be it. Resolved, that we, as a portion of the citizens of the United States, will support the Constitution as it now stands, together with the amendments thereunto appended, and that we will strictly adhere to the decisions of the United States Supreme Court made under said Constitution, where a difference of opinion has heretofore or may hereafter occur between the citizens of one state and those of another, or between the state and the federal government, foreign citizens, subjects, etc. Second, be it further resolved that in our opinion the President has violated the most sacred palladium of American liberty by the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus, and thus depriving an American citizen of having the cause of his imprisonment inquired into by the proper tribunal. Third, be it further resolved that we are in favor of sustaining the southern states of the American Confederacy in all their constitutional rights, that we believe an unconstitutional war is now being waged against them to subject them to a taxation enormous and unequal, and to deprive them in the end of their species of property called slaves. Fourth, and be it lastly resolved, that we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our property, and our sacred honor to sustain our brethren of the southern states in the just defense of their constitutional rights, whether invaded by the present executive or by a foreign one. Obligation. I, here in the presence of these witnesses before Almighty God, promise and swear that I will not divulge or reveal any of the secrets of this institution to anyone except I know him to be a brother, or to instruct candidates. I furthermore swear that I will obey the proper authorities when ordered to do so, and that I will assist a brother of this institution in his rights individually or constitutionally when required of me by him, if need be with my life. All this I solemnly swear to obey under penalty of being shot. Not only the ritual as given above, but the grip, the passwords, and the words of recognition used by members of the order were discovered by the detectives and are to be found in the reports. The words of recognition ran as follows. Do you know Jones? What Jones? Preacher Jones. Where does he live? At home. Where's his home? In Dixie. Memories of pioneers. The memories of the men now living give ample corroboration of the events touched upon in the records. Henry Guess of El Monte, now well over 70 years of age, says, I remember well the meetings that used to be held at my house and at other houses in those days, and dozens of times my father woke me up in the night with orders to get up and get that fellow a horse. He is going to fight the Yankees. Mrs. Dodson of El Monte, who was 20 years old at the time, recalls meetings being held in the houses about El Monte. One man still living who took part in these stormy times is Tooch Martin of Pomona. Mr. Martin is 87 years of age, with a mind as keen and active as a man of 40. During the 80s, he served a term as one of the Los Angeles County supervisors. He was one of those who took part in the famous Bear Flag Parade in El Monte during '61. We had formed a home guard in El Monte, and every one of them were Southerners. Our first purpose was to protect our property, for we feared a general confiscation in case of a Union victory, and of course our sympathies being with the South. If the Confederacy had captured Washington, we would have struck a blow here. We were ready and determined and well organized. Our home guard asked Governor Downey for guns. Being a Democrat, we believed that he was secretly with us, but probably we were mistaken in that. At any rate, the governor sent the arms, so we were informed, but the army officers at San Pedro discovered the truth, and we never got them. I took part in that Bear Flag Parade. There were about 200 of us, and we carried the Bear Flag. We marched around Jonathan Tibet's house in the moonlight. as we wanted to give him a scare. He was a black Republican, and we knew he was giving information to the government. In July 1861, I had finished a year as teacher of the little one-room school in El Monte, right where the cement bridge is now. But before the trustees would employ me for another year, they demanded that I take the oath of allegiance to the United States. Being a Texan, of course, I refused, and they refused to pay me my last half year's salary, $119. I was only 17 at the time, so I went upstate to Healdsburg, where I had relatives, and went 6 months to the high school there. I organized the Lodge of the Knights of the Golden Circle, of which I was already a member in Healdsburg. We had a big lodge in El Monte, almost everyone belonging to it, except 3 or 4 living down on what was known then as Black Republican Alley, the Durfees, the Johnsons, and a few others. I returned to El Monte in 1863. Gettysburg had been fought, and Vicksburg had been taken, and there wasn't much chance of the South winning. So I took the oath and got my $119. "Do you know Jones?" I inquired. "What Jones?" He answered promptly. "Preacher Jones." Good Lord, the old man gasped. "Where did you get that? I thought that everyone who knew about it was dead but me." I told him of the reports of the government detectives, and he remarked, "Well, we suspected as much at that time, but we couldn't tell who they were." Jonathan Tibbetts of Riverside, a son of the Jonathan Tibbetts mentioned by Mr. Martin, confirms the story of the El Monte Bear Flag Parade. I was only a boy, but I remember it well. My father, I think, must have been in the Secret Service. He traveled about the country buying cattle, taking me with him, and he was always in consultation with Army officers. Tooch Martin was always an incorrigible old Reb, but he is right about my father giving information to the government. That night, one of the paraders mounted the high fence about our place and dared him to come out. Dad put a gun out the window and called, "Get down, Bill. I know you. Get down or I will shoot you off that fence." Bill got down.